Okay, so ready to dive into something kind of wild.
Always up for a good deep dive.
Perfect, because this one's a doozy. We're talking Elon Musk,
Oh, what?
Vivek Ramaswamy,
Interesting combo.
and a potential Department of Government efficiency.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
All of this under, let's just say, a hypothetical second Trump term.
Hypothetically speaking, of course.
Exactly. Just exploring the what-ifs here.
But the possibilities are pretty huge.
No kidding. I mean, think about it.
Okay.
These two guys, known for shaking things up, aiming to revamp
The U.S. government, no less.
the whole thing. It's like a political thriller waiting to happen.
Definitely has that what could possibly go wrong vibe.
Right. But also, what if they actually pull it off?
That's the thing with these two. They're not afraid to swing for the fences.
Exactly. So, first question, why this duo? Why Musk and Ramaswamy to lead this charge?
Well, you gotta admit, they both have a track record of tackling big problems.
And not shying away from controversy.
Let's just say they're not exactly known for conventional solutions.
Yeah, true that. So you got Elon Musk, Mr. Tesla SpaceX.
Right, the guy who's not just building electric cars, but revolutionizing transportation.
And pushing the boundaries of space exploration.
It's like he's constantly trying to optimize everything.
And then you have Vivek Ramaswamy,
who's made quite a splash in biotech.
and isn't afraid to voice his opinions on how government should work.
He's all about less government intervention, fewer regulations.
The whole less is more approach.
So on one hand, you've got Musk, the tech innovator.
And on the other, Ramaswamy, the disruptor.
Yeah, it's a combo that could lead to some really radical changes.
Okay, so let's try to picture this. What could a Musk-Ramaswamy government actually look like?
Buckle up.
Imagine renewing your driver's license online.
Oh, that'd be nice.
Having your social security application processed seamlessly by AI.
Streamline services like you wouldn't believe.
That's the potential upside. Less time wasted on bureaucracy.
More efficient service delivery.
But of course, there's always a flip side.
Always trade-offs.
Right, let's start with the whole tech-driven overhaul.
Okay. Musk is all about automation. We see it in his factories, this space program.
Yeah, it's like his signature move.
So it's not hard to imagine him applying that same mindset to government.
Think AI handling visa applications or processing tax returns.
Sounds efficient.
In theory, it could be. But what happens if the system glitches?
Or there's a cyber attack.
Those are some pretty big what-ifs.
And let's not forget about the people who aren't tech savvy.
The digital divide is a real concern.
We can't have efficiency at the cost of leaving people behind.
Absolutely. Efficiency without equity isn't progress.
So true.
Yeah.
And then on top of all the tech stuff, you've got Ramaswamy's push for streamlining bureaucracy.
Right, he's argued that regulations often stifle innovation.
Slow things down.
Exactly.
So fewer regulations, faster approvals for projects.
Which sounds appealing on the surface.
I mean, who hasn't been frustrated by red tape at some point?
Sure, but those regulations are often there for a reason.
To protect consumers, the environment, public safety.
Exactly. So the question becomes, what gets sacrificed in the name of speed? It's a tricky balance, for sure.
Yeah, you could end up with unintended consequences.
Right. Like imagine you're an entrepreneur trying to launch a new business.
Okay.
Less red tape would be amazing.
Of course.
But would you be okay with less stringent environmental regulations to make that happen?
It's a tough call.
Where do we draw the line between efficiency and responsibility?
That's the million-dollar question. And it leads to another big issue.
Spending.
Spending.
Right, this hypothetical department is all about cutting waste and reducing debt.
Which is a goal a lot of people can get behind.
But the devil's in the detail.
Always is.
Where do those cuts actually fall?
Essential services. Social safety nets. Public programs.
Those are tough choices.
Very real consequences for people.
It's not just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about people's lives.
You can't forget the human element.
Exactly. And that brings us to another potentially game-changing aspect of this whole thing.
Let me guess, data and AI.
You got it.
Figures. It's Musk and Ramaswamy we're talking about.
I mean, imagine all your government-related information, your medical records, tax filings,
Social security data, everything in one place.
managed by sophisticated AI systems.
On one hand, it could make things super efficient.
Streamline personalized government services.
But on the other hand, talk about a privacy nightmare.
Right. The potential for data breaches, misuse of information.
Government overreach. It's a scary thought.
And it's not just hypothetical anymore.
The technology for this level of data integration is already here.
The question is, do we want to go down that road?
And if so, how do we do it responsibly? How do we protect people's privacy?
Big questions.
Huge questions that we need to be asking right now.
Because this whole scenario, it's not just about efficiency.
It's about control.
And ultimately about what kind of society we want to live in.
Exactly. Do we value speed and convenience above everything else?
Or are there certain things that are more important, like privacy and individual rights?
Those are the kind of conversations we need to be having.
So yeah, this deep dive, it's a bit of a mind bender.
But it's an important one.
Because these aren't just hypothetical questions anymore. They're very real possibilities.
And the choices we make now could have a huge impact on the future.
No doubt about it.
It's easy to get lost in all the tech talk, but we got to remember this is about real people.
Yeah, we can't forget the human element in all of this.
Exactly. I mean, you can't just automate empathy or compassion.
Right. Algorithms can't really understand the nuances of people's lives.
And when you're talking about government services like healthcare,
Social Security.
education, those are areas where the human touch is essential.
Absolutely. It's not just about processing applications or crunching numbers.
There are real people on the receiving end of those services.
Imagine getting a letter saying your healthcare benefits have been cut.
Because an algorithm decided it was an efficiency measure.
Sounds pretty heartless, right?
It's the risk you run when you prioritize efficiency above everything else.
Especially when it comes to social safety nets.
Right. Those programs are designed to protect the most vulnerable people.
And we can't just leave them behind in the name of progress.
Exactly. Efficiency without compassion isn't really progress at all.
So even if this Department of Government efficiency does become a reality...
It's going to face some serious pushback.
Oh, yeah. Washington is not exactly known for embracing change.
Especially when it comes to disrupting the status quo.
You can bet there will be plenty of people who benefit from the way things are now.
And they're not going to give up their power easily.
But Musk and Ramaswamy, they're not exactly known for backing down from a fight.
True. They've both challenged the establishment in their own ways.
So do you think they could actually overcome the political inertia?
It would be an uphill battle for sure.
Navigating the political landscape, building coalitions, winning over skeptics.
It's a whole different game than launching a tech company or shaking up the biotech industry.
And even if they do manage to pull it off,
There's always the potential for unintended consequences.
what happens when the AI system managing your Social Security payments crashes?
Or someone hacks into the centralized database with all your personal information.
Those are some pretty scary scenarios.
And it highlights the fact that even the most brilliant technology isn't foolproof.
It can malfunction. It can be vulnerable to attack.
And when you're talking about essential government services.
The stakes are incredibly high.
So we're back to that balance between efficiency and risk.
Right. On one hand, you have the potential for streamlining services, reducing waste.
Making government more responsive to people's needs.
But on the other hand, you have the potential for privacy violations, security breaches.
And just a general loss of control over your own information.
It all comes down to trust.
Exactly. How much are we willing to trust a tech-driven government?
And what safeguards need to be in place to protect us from those risks?
These are fundamental questions that we need to answer before we go any further down this road.
Because it's not just about the technology itself.
It's about the values that guide its implementation.
Do we prioritize speed and efficiency above everything else?
Or do we also value things like fairness, equity, and the well-being of all citizens?
This whole scenario, it's like a thought experiment on a massive scale.
It forces us to confront some of the biggest questions facing our society today.
And to really think about what kind of future we want to create. Yeah, it really makes you think about the trade-offs we might face.
Right. Is progress always worth the potential downsides?
Exactly. And that's kind of the heart of this whole deep dive.
Taking this wild scenario
Musk, Ramaswamy, Department of Government efficiency.
under a hypothetical second Trump term.
And just really exploring the possibilities.
The good, the bad, and the potentially ugly.
Because on one hand, you can see the appeal.
Streamlining government, making things more efficient, using technology to improve services.
It sounds great in theory.
But then you start digging deeper and you realize,
There are some serious questions we need to consider.
like what happens to privacy in a hyper-efficient, tech-driven government?
Do we end up sacrificing individual rights in the name of progress?
And how do we make sure that everyone benefits from these changes, not just a select few?
It's a tricky balance, for sure.
It really is. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not just about efficiency.
It's about values.
Exactly. What do we prioritize as a society?
Is it speed, cost savings, just getting things done?
Or are there other things that matter more, like fairness, equity, the well-being of all citizens.
These are tough questions.
But they're questions we can't afford to ignore.
Because the choices we make about government, they have real-world consequences.
They shape the kind of society we live in.
So for our listeners out there, what's the takeaway?
I think this whole scenario, it forces us to really examine what we value in government
What we're willing to sacrifice.
and what we absolutely refuse to compromise on.
It's a reminder that efficiency isn't the be-all and end-all.
It's a means to an end.
And the end goal should always be a better society for everyone.
A society where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
So yeah, this deep dive, it's been a bit of a whirlwind.
A lot to unpack.
But hopefully it's given our listeners some food for thought.
Some things to ponder as we navigate this increasingly complex world.
Because the choices we make, they matter.
They really do. And ultimately, it's up to each of us to decide what kind of future we want to create.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive.
My pleasure. Always a good time.
And to our listeners out there, keep those questions coming. Keep those conversations going. Because the future is in our hands.